A very, very good morning to all the participants today. And as per our decided schedule of events, today we are going to talk about ISO certification process. So we'll be taking you through the step-by-step alignment as to how the ISO certification process is supposed to work. And I'll be broadly covering all the aspects of ISO certification. And therefore, you can see the line, your roadmap to quality, safety, compliance management, and excellence. So the first question, as we all obviously would like to ask, is what is this ISO certification all about? So first we need to understand what is ISO altogether. So ISO is the International Organization for Standardization. And if you are following our previous webinars, you should be, as of now, be able to understand that ISO issues certain standards, and these standards are either industry specific or they are generic. And given the applicability and the compliance sought by the applicant organization, ISO ensures that those aspects pertaining to either quality or environment or occupational health or safety, they are met. So broadly, if we are to say that I need to certify my organization for quality management systems, the standard I will pick is ISO 9001. And likewise, for environmental management systems, it will be ISO 14001. And if I need to seed my compliance in my organizational aspect of health, that is the occupational health safety, and how well my employees or my workers are, you can say, addressing occupational health, then the OHSMS, that is the Occupational Health Safety Management System, will be the standard to pick. So, what does ISO broadly do? It classifies and it you can say outline certain golden rules, as you can call it. And these golden rules are compiled in the form of standards, and these ensure consistent quality, customer satisfaction, and continuous improvement. And more importantly, the aspect that we try to cover here will be compliance. Then, of course, there are sector specific standards. Like for healthcare, we have the HQMS, that is the HOMS, that is Healthcare Organization Management Standards, that is the ISO 7101. Of course, we also have the ISO 15189 standard for clinical laboratories, that is for medical labs. And for medical devices, we have ISO 13485 and more other standards as applicable and specific to the sectors that are in concern. So why ISO certification? What is the need of ISO certification altogether as of now? So of course, in front of the customer, it enhances your credibility and trust. And of course, the organization which is applying or undergoing the ISO implementation process, you will find that its internal efficiency is increased multifold. And of course, number of government and private sector contracts, they require that the organization with whom they are either doing business or they are trying to tie up or impanel, they should have ISO certification beforehand. And of course, ISO provides a framework for continuous improvement without which there won't be much scope left for an existing organization to further improve. Now, coming to the key players as to who are the personnel or who are the participants when it comes to ISO certification. The first one is obviously the organization. So, who is the organization? The organization is perhaps the company or the healthcare organization, the institution or the establishment which implements the QMS or the quality management system. So the organization could be a hospital, it could be a clinic, it could be a manufacturer, it could be a producer organization. Depending on the activities, that is the inputs, outputs, the processes involved, an organization is classified, and this body is basically that body which implements or which follows the rules and the, you can say, the golden principles that the ISO standards imbibe. The next key player is the consultant. Now it's an optional process. So the consultant will basically be some senior member in the team who will basically guide the process, guide the preparation of documents, guide the team members, train, handhold the organizational representatives, and ensure that the processes, the standards, and the objectives of the ISO systems are matched and maintained. Then comes the certification body. So, certification body is the body which conducts audits and it grants the certificate. And lastly, we have the accreditation body, which ensures that the certificate is being issued by a certifying body which is legitimate. So the legitimacy is ensured when we are to identify the accreditation body. So basically, when we see a certificate, we must find that the certification body and the accreditation body are identified on the certificate. And of course, nowadays, as we are aware that there are certain scams and certain duplicate, you can say authenticators. So I will guide you how to identify such, you can say, lacunae and not be victims of the same. So now coming to the step-by-step process of the ISO certification program. So the first thing, this is basically an ideology to be understood by the organization or perhaps the implementing the people who are going to implement the QMS. I'm sure many of you are quality managers. Many of you are also safety officers in your respective organizations. So my request would be you need to undertake this process first so that you have a basic level clarity as to how the processes will go about and eventually you will be granted the certificate. So the first step is gap analysis. You first do a gap analysis, identify where your current practices are and where you are technically falling short. Then you come to set your documentation system. So basically, of course, as I'm sure that our evaluators might have previously shared with you, we will have a separate webinar on documentation. It will be a much elaborate one. But then there is a documentation pyramid. I'll just elaborate in a very short while, as short as I can get. So there is going to be a pyramid in which you will have your, you can say quality manual at the top, or you can say the apex manual, and then you'll have your procedures, then you will have your records, and finally you will have your what do you call the forms and formats that will be ensuring that your documents are complete, compliant, and in control. So when I mean to say control, control implies that there is a specific number, there is a specific series, there is a specific tracer on each document which you can identify, which you can go back and trace as to see whether the document that you have in hand is genuinely your own organizational document. So the documentation has to be robust. You should not have any uncontrolled documents in the set. You should have your manuals, procedures, records, and then you will sit to do the implementation. So implementation implies that you will now do the training of the identified staff. So you have now got your documents in place. So the staff training begins in the implementation stage. And you need to ensure that the QMS, that is the quality management system, is applied across the operations. I'm repeating the word across. Number of times what we identify, oh, we have skipped out the housekeeping, or oh, we have skipped out a certain management process, or maybe, kind of the security process, which is supposedly an outsourced process, or the laundry process, which is the outsourced process. So we need to apply the QMS across the operations. We simply cannot afford to lose out on the TQM aspect, for which ISO TQM, again, as I would like to reiterate, that is the total quality management system. So we need to ensure that the quality management system is applied to the entire process of operations and not just singularly fragmented parts. Then moving forward, we do an internal audit after the implementation program or the training is complete. So why do we do an internal audit? So the purpose is to assess the effectiveness, to spot the gaps, and to identify whether there are still scope of improvements in areas where we can definitely have not exactly corrections, but definitely scope of improvements wherein we can ensure that our outputs are better and we are in a position to effectively demonstrate the you can say overall gambit of quality improvement and quality management systems. Once the internal audit is done, we move to the next step, that is the management review. So you have your internal audit, you have your documentation, you have your implementation, you did a preliminary gap analysis. So now it is time for the leadership or the ownership of the organization, the top management of the organization, to evaluate the system. Whether we have assessed and performed as per the requirements, prerequisites, or whether we need to have more insights in place, more efforts in place to ensure that our processes and systems are compliant to the ISO requirements. So once this is all done, then there is an optional process by each certifying body called as the pre-certification audit, which is often called as the pre-assessment. If most of you who are aware of healthcare practices in India, so most of you are aware of pre-assessment or pre-certification audit. This is an optional stance by the certification body, and why this is kept? Because of course the certification body is also aware that they are also liable to undergo an audit at their stage or at their you can say traceability level. So, in order to ensure that the organization, the applicant organization, is prepared and well versed with the terminologies, with the documentation systems, with the assessment protocols. So, a pre certification audit is usually an option which is presented. And the reason being simple that this pre certification audit is just to handhold, or you can say just to give a cushion kind of a feel to the organization so that when they are facing the certification audit, they are aware as to what are the requirements and how will the actual certification audit be. So it is just like you can say a pre-examination kind of key. It is just, kind of to just ascertain as to, how the processes will be when the actual certification audit happens. So it's an optional process. Number of organizations which are confident, which they find that we can directly go for the certification audit, they move forward for the certification audit. There are certain organizations which feel that no, 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 it's not a necessity. So they go for the pre-certification audit first and then proceed to the next stage, that is the certification audit. So when the certification audit happens, it happens in two stages. So the first stage is document review. So as you can see, the first stage here was gap analysis, followed by documentation. Documentation again, the manuals, the procedures, the records, and of course the form formats and the entire control systems that you created will be reviewed first. Then the second stage will be how effectively the documents were, implemented in practice will be the evaluation done by the auditor on site. So it will be an on-site evaluation depending on the organizational size, depending on the volume, depending on the capacity. The certification body will decide the number of auditors or the number of assessors as we call it, and they will send these assessors or auditors on site on the soft floor of the organization. That is, it could be a hospital, it could be a clinic, it could be you can say a pharmacy, it could be anything like a manufacturer. So if it is a producing organization, it's a factory. So the evaluation will be done on site. So on site, the certification body will be sending assessors. They will be checking the overall implementation, the documents, and they will be issuing a report. Of course, their observations will carry certain points that will be called as non-compliances, and the organization will be asked to rectify those non-compliances or to give suitable replies as to why this particular aspect is not met or why this particular non-compliance is established on site. So once this entire exercise is completed, so the organization replies back in the stipulated time frame, and then the certificate is granted. Typically for 3 years in the case of certain ISO standards. And of course, there are, you can say, checkpoints, which are also called as surveillance audits, which are done annually. And then we have the cycle of continuous improvement. So now that you are an ISO certified organization, your cycle of continuous improvement starts. You shouldn't mistake it for the fact that, oh, now that I've received the certificate, so I'm now going to rest for the next 3 years. No, in fact, you have now, you can say, taken the first step to the cycle of quality improvement, or the PDCA cycle as we call it. So now the cycle of continuous improvement will start. You have to maintain the standards, the practices, the effectivity has to be, you can say, demonstrated at all times. And of course, there has to be scope for enhancement. So as you all aware that every ISO standard is basically kind of a, you can say, a revision is likely in every 8 to 10 years, which is the common cycle. So in the case of ISO 9001, we are expecting a revision somewhere in late 2025 or 26, early 26, if I have to say. But as of now, the draft standards are expected. So this is the cycle typically that will involve that. Of course, the ISO standards itself is evolving, is what I would like to say. So do not mistake the fact that, I have taken a certificate now, kind of I will be in a position where, you know, I'll be resting for the next 3 years or whatever time the certificate has been issued. So that should not be the case in any stance throughout the continuous improvement cycle. Now, this is something which we need to avoid as organizations. What are these points? I would like to just elaborate. See, the first point being there are certain fake certifying bodies in the market. And it's very easy to identify them because the type of advertisement they do and the type of, commitments they make, it's very easy to identify whether it's a, fake certification body or it's a genuine certification body. So my request would be to all of you to stop relying and have your filters in place wherein you can identify a fake certification body, and please, kind of don't give business to such bodies which don't have value on paper. See, this entire exercise is for value addition. So we need to understand very clearly that if you're not adding value, so then there's no point in, taking a certificate, even if it is lucratively placed at a price point that, you will find that, oh, yes, it's worth considering. So I would request you all to please consider that fact before you actually select a certification body for your ISO program. So the common pitfall number one that I would like to be very specifically across the table, I would like to request all of you is please stop relying on fake certifying bodies. Second pitfall to avoid is commonly poor documentation control. See, why are we doing the ISO program? The first thing that you need to understand very, very clearly is that ISO is basically a value addition exercise. We are not doing ISO certification just for the namesake or just for the sake of, kind of hanging a frame on the wall saying, oh, yes, our organization is ISO certified. See, there is a certain logic to ISO standards, and this logic somewhere implies better practices. So if your documentation systems, perhaps your forms, your formats, your SOPs, your outputs, they are all uncontrolled, that is a reflector of poor documentation control. So please, my request to all of you would be that please do not, kind of, first, of course, a fake certification body will, kind of not want you to have a proper documentation control system. Secondly, you being in the position of the quality head or the quality manager, the responsibility is on you to ensure that the entire gambit of documents is controlled. So you need to have a strong documentation system which has a specific numbering, which has a specific control pattern, and you and only you are able to very clearly demarcate that this is my system and this is where I can demonstrate my you can say control patterns very, very specifically and very precisely. The third pitfall to avoid would be lack of leadership commitment. So, as you all are aware, that majority of the times we get feedback from the market that the uh, owner of the organization, he outsourced the quality process to some consultant, and eventually that consultant is the whole and sole owner of the process of ISO certification, or perhaps any accreditation for that matter. And when it comes to follow up or kind of actual implementation, so the top management says, "Oh, no, 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 it's now my headache is now on your shoulders. Now you take care of the entire process, and you need to drive things further." So that is another pitfall that should be avoided. Apparently, the owner of the organization is a key member or a key participant when it comes to, you can say, demonstrating leadership commitment. And ISO, somewhere or the other, always wants that leadership at all levels should be established and maintained right from the top management. See, management flows from the top. So when leadership is established, a commitment is visible. So obviously, ISO or any accreditation standard for that matter becomes very easy. So this pitfall must be avoided at all costs, that the leadership or perhaps the you can say ownership or the top management, they are not committed. So this is one pitfall that should be avoided at all costs and expenses and at all levels. Next, we come to another pitfall, that is treating certification as a one-time activity. Now, this is another a very funny, you can say, dilemma that we normally face. That when we apply for the certification for the first time, so it is a very enthusiastic and a very energy draining process, because there are a number of things that need to be addressed. There are a number of documents, there are a number of SOPs, number of trainings, and number of things that are involved in the overall program, including certain procurements, including certain process changes, hirings, and whatnot. But once the audit is done and once the certificate is issued, so things take a backseat. And it's common, it's nothing new. Things take a backseat. And the reason for this backseat is that it is assumed somewhere in the organization that now is the resting phase. We'll see what happens after the expiry of the certificate. And exactly that is what happens when a surveillance assessment is placed, or maybe kind of the renewal assessment comes in purview. So people again start doing the running around and firefighting, and eventually the whole process or the whole essence of the quality system is lost. So never treat certification as a one-time activity is my request to all of you. Okay? Now, as I said, there are certain certification bodies in the market which are fake, which are not reliable. They don't have any paper value. They charge you a certain amount of fee for certification, and these price points are extremely lucrative. Would be agreeable that when a genuine body is charging you say XYZ amount, the fake certification body will charge you for peanuts, and therefore the overall proposition from a price capping viewpoint for a fake certification body becomes extremely lucrative, and it's extremely magnetic. I'm getting the certificate at such a competitive price point. But at a later stage, when that certificate is supposed to be verified or supposed to be validated for its real-time usage, it is somewhere a shocker, or things go back to square one when we understand that the certifying body itself was a fake certification body. So, how to check, how to verify is the first question. So, in India, we have the National Accreditation Board for certification bodies. So, if you go to the NABCB website, which is basically the you can say one of the branch bodies of QCI, that is the Quality Council of India. So you can simply just click on the tab of certification bodies. And one thing that I would definitely appreciate about NABCB is they have very systematically mentioned the list of their approved or validated certifying bodies. So it's very simple. You just go to the NABCB website, click on the link which is mentioned, and they have segregated these domains into QMS, into EMS, into OHMS, OHSMS, and so on and so forth. And they have very beautifully chalked out which are the certifying bodies or which are the agencies who are authorized by the NABCB to issue such certificates in India. However, sometimes what we find is that there are certain common certificates, like for example, ISO 9001. Now, there are certain bodies which may not be in the gambit of IAF, but then they might not be in the gambit of NABCB, but they might be internationally recognized. Because as we know, there is a body called IAF, that is the International Accreditation Forum. So, what does this International Accreditation Forum do? It identifies certain accreditation bodies from each country. Okay, from each country, there will be one accreditation body. In the case of India, it is NABCB, but in the case of some other country, like nowadays we see Egypt. So, Egypt, there is a body called ECAC, that is the EGAC. Okay, and similarly, there are bodies belonging to each country. Like we have one more body that is what I recollect is the UKAS, that is for the you can say UK, the United Kingdom Accreditation Services, and so forth. So, in case of certain exporters, where you are the manufacturer, you want to send your product to some other country, the clause in their contracts somewhere allows bodies like IAF, recognized, you can say, accreditation bodies, to issue you certificates and they are valid. That is also accepted to a large extent. However, if you identify a certifying body which neither has IAF nor does it have its name in NABCB, it should be an alarm bell that do not proceed for certification in that case. Because eventually you will come to realize that when you present that certificate in public, when you present that certificate in some tendering process or in some export entity requirement, it will backfire and it might also lead to a negative marker to your organizational ethics and principles. So please ensure that you stick to the genuine process that is outlined. The other aspect that I would also like to highlight over here is that there are certain bodies, there are certain certifying agencies who can, kind of very confidently promote the fact that we can give you the certificate without an audit. Now, see the overall purpose. Why are organizations likely to undergo ISO certification in the first place? It is not just about getting a certificate in the end, but it is also a marker or a performance reviewer of your organizational practices. So, unless you don't undergo an audit, how will you identify in the first place whether your organization is compliant or non-compliant? So we should be very, very specific regarding the fact that when we are applying for the process, we should be very clear in our minds that an audit is a compulsory parameter in that particular certification process. If anyone promises you, oh, we'll give you the certificate without an audit, you must have the second warning bell in your head. The proposition is definitely going to be a fake one, and there will be, you can say, repercussions eventually, not immediately, eventually in the course of the organizational life cycle. That is to be understood. So, to wrap up, I would like to just wind up with a few closing points. So, ISO is more than a certificate that is supposed to be understood. It could be any ISO certificate for that matter. It could be ISO 9001, it could be ISO 7101, it could be ISO 15189. It is more than a certificate, it's a mindset. So, organizations with that mindset should only step forward for the ISO certification. If the mindset is missing, there is no point in going forward for the certification. The second point that I would like to precisely point out over here is that please choose your certifying partners wisely. Choose your consultant wisely, choose your certification body wisely, and choose your accreditation body wisely. They will matter a lot because this entire activity is not only going to cost the organization from the pricing point, of course, it will also cost the organization time, resources, and number of other amendments that eventually should contribute to organizational excellence. So if the partners are itself, you can say, diluted, so the overall essence of the process will also be diluted. So please choose your certifying partners wisely. And obviously, the last wrap up that I would like to present over here is that please keep your focus on real improvements and not just compliance. Just because the ISO standard is saying I'm going to do it will not be the ideal scenario to, you can say, perceive. Please keep your focus on real improvements, and that is what will make the game change a difference from a non-certified ISO organization to a certified ISO organization. So with that, I would like to open the ground for questions. If there are any questions, we can discuss it now.